Today is somewhat different. Let's build a PC. Now, to give you a little bit of context, well, back when the Ryzen 7 7800X3D was introduced and was going to launch, I was unfortunately not in Singapore. In fact, I was in Japan, enjoying myself. But when I came back, I decided that I really want to take a look at this because this is so interesting. But by then, lots of publications have already published their reviews of the 7800X3D on itself. So I decided it might not make much of a difference if I were to just solely focus on the CPU itself, so why not do a PC build? And so thanks to our friends and partners with the various brands, this is going to be one heck of a PC build that we think it's not only just going to look nice, but it's somewhat reasonable as well. Now today's video is totally unscripted, I'm just talking and sharing my thoughts, and I even have two cameras set up. So that's the main camera, and I have a Insta360 as a second camera right there. And that's going to be used as kind of a time-lapse when we do the PC build, just to speed things up a little bit. But before we get into that, let's really talk about what we have here. So first, we have the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. This is, well, as many people already know, a really capable chip. 8 cores, 16 threads, just 120 watt TDP, and of course, you are getting this because of that 3D V-cache. It's really amazing, especially for gaming. As for the motherboard, now we decided to just play it safe and to kind of, be a little bit reasonable in terms of pricing and whatnot. So we are going with the Asus TUF B650M Wi-Fi edition. Now, as you might already know, this is an MATX motherboard. So today's build is actually going to be MATX, which is quite uncommon nowadays. But anyways, now we move on to the GPU. We have two GPUs right now. This is the Asus ROG Strix 4070 Ti OC edition, and we also have the reference or founders edition, I guess, the AMD Radeon RX 7900 XTX. Now, for this video, we are probably going with the 7900 XTX just because we feel that AMD might be the more sensible option with this generation, but there is a second reason for this. Unfortunately, we couldn't really find the 12-pin adapter to 12-pin to 8-pin adapter for our 4070 Ti, so we can't really build it at the moment, at least until we find a spare or go and purchase one. But just goes to show that the standard 8-pin makes a lot of sense. So we are going with the 7900 XTX for this video. But if you guys are interested in checking out a 4070 Ti build with this very build, do let us know in the comments and perhaps we might make a second video. Subscribe. Anyways, so for cooling, we have somewhat of an overkill solution here, especially for the 7800X3D, but we do have the Asus Strix LC2 360, the Ryzen, and this is a 360mm AIO liquid cooler that would be more than adequate for what this is supposed to be. So no issues on this here, but honestly, if you just want to save a little bit of cash, just go with a decent mid-tower and just go with something like a Scythe Filmer or like the latest Peerless Assassin, or if you want to be a little bit fancy, you can go for a Noctua or any of those things. So you don't necessarily need an AIO, but this is what we have in the office, so this is what we're going to use for this build. Now, as for RAM, of course, we are just going with pretty standard 32 gigs of HyperX Fury, 6000 MHz Expo, as well as a 1TB SSD, PCIe Gen 4 SSD from Asus themselves. This is the SQ7. Now, of course, you also do need to get a little bit of thermal paste just in case you run out or you make a bit of a mistake. So we just have a really standard Arctic MX6 here. You can go with MX4 or any other that you choose, or if you want to be really fancy, you can go for Thermal Grizzly instead, which does net some substantial temperature performance improvements. So you can do that, but any standard thermal paste will do, honestly. As for power supply, we don't really have the box here because we actually yanked this out of our test bench. So this is a Cooler Master V850, 850 watts, 80 plus go, no issues, pretty standard. You'll be well covered for any of these two GPUs. And as for the case, this is somewhat interesting because we actually really wanted to do a build in this case, and thankfully Asus was kind enough to loan us one. This is the Asus Prime AP201, and it's a really good case. Like, it's just good on all fronts. It looks good, it performs great, it's of pretty good value, and it's an M-ATX case, which is not that common nowadays. But paired with our motherboard of choice today, it's gonna look fantastic. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the build, and we're gonna go through some of the important key pointers and stuff, show you the full build, the time lapse, and ultimately some sexy B-rolls. So let's get into it. Right, so here it is, a really simple setup, and as you can tell, it's the second or third day. Well, it's been a while since we actually built a PC, but we've already put it through this test, and this performs really well, as you can see in the gaming benchmarks that we're going to show you in just a bit. But just share with you a little bit of the whole setup here. So we have the PC, all nice, well and built, and you can just pair it with a really decent 4K monitor as we have here. This is the ROG XG27UQ, which is a 4K 144Hz monitor. Get a decent keyboard, a mouse, and probably a mouse mat, and you're good to go. This is a really decent setup. But so before we get into the nitty-gritty things and talk about the PC, the temperatures, and all that stuff, let's get into the gaming benchmarks. So you've seen the numbers. This is a really impressive PC, and honestly I'm pleasantly surprised at how well this turned out. The Ryzen 7 7800X 3D performed admirably, and paired with the Radeon RX 7900 XTX, it's phenomenal. This is a really great gaming PC. So there are a couple of things that I did notice after building a PC and using it for a while, and I think it all really comes down to preference. Now I do love this case, the Asus Prime AP201. This is a phenomenal case, it looks great, it performs great, it's of great value, all the good stuff. But you do have to note that this is a fully mesh design, so there are two things that you need to really consider before you get this case. Firstly, it's mesh, so you get good airflow and all that, great temperatures. But depending on your setup, it can get a little bit loud, depending on your preference. Now sure, you can go into RG Armory Crate and change the fan speed and all that stuff, as with the cooler that we have here. And you can use MSI Afterburner to kind of limit the fan speed on the graphics card itself as well. But just do know that if you do have the case on top of the desk, like we have here, it's still going to be a little bit noisy, depending on the workload that you're going to put it through. And secondly, of course, dust. Depending on where you are, dust might be an issue. There's only a dust filter on the bottom for this case, so it might actually be preferable to do bottom intakes on the case itself, and that would probably help with the dust mitigation a little bit, but just do note that you might want to clean it more regularly from time to time as compared to other cases. Apart from that though, of course, with this whole setup, you're free to choose whichever monitor you want, but we would say that given the specs that we have with this PC, 4K 144Hz or at least 1440p 240Hz or even 360Hz would be more ideal. So definitely don't skimp on your monitor, because that's actually one of the most important part when it comes to a PC build, as this is the one thing that you'll be staring at all day. This is arguably more important than your PC. Now to add on to that, we also want to talk a little bit more about the power draw and the temperature. In terms of power draw, right now, idling on a desktop, we are drawing right about 180 watts or so, and during gaming loads, you are looking at roughly 450 to 550 watts. So technically, if you want to save a little bit, you can go with a smaller power supply like a 650 watt or 750 watt. In our personal opinion, however, we'll definitely recommend at least a 750 watt just in case you want to upgrade with additional SSDs or hard disk, or even change up with more RAM or even a more power hungry CPU, up to you. Now as for temperatures, honestly, as you can tell with a mesh PC, a mesh case, really fantastic. Even in Singapore, or at least in AC room where the temperature is pretty standard around 24 degrees Celsius, we are looking at a GPU temperature of just about 75, less than 80 degrees during gaming, and the CPU is well taken care of with that 360mm liquid cooler, so no worries on that front. So, all in all, how much did this cost us? For the PC itself, it came up to roughly 3,300 Singapore dollars or about 2,500 US dollars. So in all honesty, it's not that bad. Now, is it the most affordable and most value-oriented PC? No. For that, you probably want to drop down the graphics card a little, and probably you can also go for a more affordable motherboard or even drop the RAM down to 16 gigs. Up to you. But we would say that with this current build, it probably makes the most sense given this generation of pricing and the performance that you can actually get from the PC for the years to come. So, but if you want to save a little bit, we would suggest either going with the RTX 4070 instead, or perhaps if you don't want to go with Team Green this time around, you can actually look at this previous generation of AMD cards. The RX 6800 that we have here, or even the RX 6800 XT, actually makes a lot of sense. Especially so if you're not into ray tracing and all that stuff. AMD is honestly looking really good. So there you have it. This is a PC that we actually really enjoyed building, and overall we think this is one fantastic build. But let us know if you want us to rather check out this exact same build but with the Strix 4070 Ti OC instead. You're looking at about the same price, but probably a slight difference in performance, especially given the games that you'll want to play on the PC. Now, we also understand that given the value of PC nowadays, does it really make sense as compared to a console like a PS5 or Xbox Series X? We say that argument isn't really valid depending on what you do, because this is ultimately a PC and can do much more things with it. So it's up to you. Personally, PC all the way. But anyways, if you like this video, do consider giving us a like and subscribing to us for more of such content, and follow us on all our social channels, be it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. And of course, we'll see you in the next one. See ya!